What database do you use? I use file system for a lot, and then I use Couchbase, which is a document or JSON store. And I define that by having a list of just classes that are savable, and I give them a unique name, and then I give them with this, I tell them this has a database path, and this database path is just like a file system path basically. And that can automatically be converted either to a key in Couchbase or a path on the file system with subfolders. And then this can automatically then generate a JSON file from that class file and save that to one of these systems. And this makes it very easy to add more stuff to the system. And then, yeah, this is how it looks then in the database, for example. This would be my user profile. And then you just get a JSON format thing like this. And then changes that I do are not instantly saved. They are streamed, right? So what I do is I load most of the data into memory when the server's booting up to have memory speeds. So it's way, way, way less than 1 milliseconds to get any kind of data from the user profile. And then if I do any kind of change, then that user profile is being marked as to be saved, gets into a queue system, and then that queue system is slowly streaming all of the data to the database or to the file system, so it's not getting laggy if like 50 people do something at the same time. And yeah, I think that's the correct approach for specifically for games, because the data integrity is not that important compared to not being laggy, right? It's if you have to choose between one of those, it's in games it's nearly always okay, no lags. That's always the go-to. That's how I use Couchbase. And then I use Couchbase also to be able to move data from one server to another, right? We can see here that I have the different databases. So this one, for example, is the data of a specific server that is the user profiles and user settings and so on. And then these two are the data and binary data for whatever you saved in the game. So I can go to my shitty web version thing, and I can look at all the saved areas that I saved from my specific account here. And you can see it has images of whatever I saved. All of these images are automatically generated. I do not take screenshots or something myself. All of these are dynamically generated from the system, which is pretty nice because they even include chickens here. And then that file is saved, right, in the database. So now I could say, okay, this area here that is saved under the name chick. And we can see that there is something interesting here with the chickens, and we also have a lot of other stuff here in the world, right? And the chickens are over there. So what we can do now is we can go into the game. We can say, we actually want this in that game, right? So we go here, let's see if that is mine. I actually don't need to type commands anymore. Nice. Yep, this is mine. So I just do chunk select and chick. That is the thing I saved. Let's go over here, I guess. So now I have a selection that is exactly what I saved in my database, and now I can just do chunk paste. There was a bug in there, but I don't remember if I fixed it. We'll see now. I guess I fixed it. There you can see that it's being inserted, right? And the chickens are exactly where we expected them to be, right? You can see 2 there, 2 there, 1 there. If we now look at the screenshot here that we looked at in the beginning, well, close enough. Wait, let me insert that one more time. In the beginning, they should have been at the correct position. So let's do that one more time. Right, this is what we expected. So a bunch there and then 2 there, and this is what close to what we have on the screenshot, right? The screenshot is also taken. The system that takes the screenshot is inserting the data into a game world and then taking a screenshot afterwards. So between inserting the data and then taking the screenshot, there's maybe 2 or 3 seconds. So this is why the chickens moved a little bit. So the screenshot is like 3 seconds after inserting. And they obviously run randomly, right? So that might be a little bit wrong here. I could freeze them. Maybe I'm gonna integrate that. And then, because this does definitely not fit this world, we can just do chunk undo. And then we want to remove all of this data from the world. And now we have the original back. Does it make sense to switch MySQL database to Couchbase? Depends heavily on what you are doing with that database, right? Keep in mind the way that I am using the database is mostly by having it just as a document store, right? So what I do is every time the server boots up, I grab data from Couchbase and put it into the memory for 99% of the data that I need. And only for the last 1% of the data, in terms of how much is requested, I would then actively, if somebody writes a command, I would look into the database, look into the database, look into the database. But this heavily depends on what exactly you are building, right? Let's say you create a plugin that has a friend list system, and you have latest posts, and you have a newspaper that contains the latest posts of different people and so on. So there's a lot of connection between people and references of people and so on. In those cases, you want to have a relational database that helps you to get all of the related data of something. That's why MySQL then would be better, most likely. Couchbase is a little bit more in the direction of I know exactly what data I want, and I can query that data directly, or I can update that data directly. That is why I use that database, because most of the data is like structural. Where are the plots? I know there must be a plot here. I know exactly how that plot is named, so I can directly access that plot. I don't have something like, give me a list of all of the plots in this area or something, and I don't know how many they are. I know exactly all of the names of all of the plots even beforehand. So there's a very different thing in terms of how to access data. Yeah, so keep that in mind, right? The reason why I chose that database is because it scales very easily. I get JSON files. JSON files are very easy to read, in my opinion, and very easy to update. I chose it specifically because it's easier to just add a new thing to the JSON than adding a new column into a database. That's also something. And then the data that I'm sending out over the API, we integrated an API where you can query all of this data over that API, right? So even how much money you have in the game, or how much accounts you have in the game, what transactions you did in the game, all of that you can query over an API, over a web service. So all of that data we sent over the web service is also in JSON formatting, right? So it is also kind of consistent to have all of the data in the same kind of structure, so it's easy to spot problems in between those, and you don't need to learn 5 different things. So a table structure, a JSON structure, a DTO structure, a whatever structure. So in this case, it's like JSON in the database, JSON on the file system, JSON in the API, and JSON while loading documents, and so on, right? So this is also helpful. So you always need to do some trade-offs, right? What do I actually want to achieve, and what is helpful on the way there? And in my case, it was I knew most of the data needs to be in memory, so it doesn't really matter how I save the data. It needs to be loaded anyway all the time. So then I just chose what is the most readable format I can choose.